Okay, now the next step is to go over to our third panel, and we're going to learn to paint rocks. Now, rocks are an incredible adventure because whenever you paint rocks, you know, it opens up the opportunity for you to use a lot of different strokes, a lot of different values, and all kinds of things that create interest in your painting. And in fact, I'll tell you what, whenever I'm teaching a seminar or a workshop, I make all my students paint rocks, even if they don't like rocks, and most people don't like to because they seem to be difficult. But I want to show you a technique today that's very unique in that it's not as hard as you think if you just be loose and free. Now, the way this works is, let's go down to our palette here, and we'll take our number 6 or number 8. In this case, I'm going to use the number 8 bristle brush. And I'm going to just blob on a few blobs of paint. Now watch how this works. For instance, down here on the palette, I've got the sienna, the blue, the purple, and the umber. Okay, now here's the way this will work. Now you just load your brush with all 4 of those, and then you come up here to your canvas, and you just blob like this. Got a little too much water in there. Now, most of us are good blobbers, so you won't have any problem doing this part. Just blob on the colors. Now, see, I may just use pure burnt sienna in a 1 or 2. May just come up with some blue and throw in up here. Now, see, the secret to this is to just put this on loose and free so that you create little shapes and dark and light areas so that you can sort of pivot from those. Use those as your guide to create the rocks. See, so watch this. Really exciting. Now, maybe a little purple. Okay. Then we start highlighting. Now, this is where you make or break the rock. This part is just blobbing on paint and leaving it alone. Now you're going to actually start forming the rock. I'm going to switch to my number 6 bristle brush, which will give me just a little bit more control. And we're going to use a combination of color. Now, since we have an orangish background, I think we'll use white and yellow more or less for our highlight. Now, you can throw a touch of orange in there if you want, but I always start with, like, got too much orange in there. Take the white and the yellow, and then I'm going to tone that down because we don't want a bright highlight yet. Remember when we just did the tree, we had 3 layers. We had the dark value, the middle value, and the light value. So now I'm just going to take the yellow and I'm going to add just maybe a little touch of mud to it, which could be a touch of purple, a touch of sienna, a touch of brown, any of the colors to kind of dull that before we start highlighting. Then we come up here and let's just start with this big one just to kind of get off on the right foot. Now watch this. Now you've got to put this on and then kind of gently blend back into the main body of the rock. Now see, out of one blob we may make several rocks. Like here's one right here maybe. You look for areas where that looks kind of like the shape of a rock coming out, and then you go in there and you highlight, and then we'll come back and put the darks behind it, and you'll be amazed. Like for instance this one up here. All right, let's go ahead and kind of block this one in, and then I'll show you how we put a little grass around it here. Here's one that could be a long slab of a rock. See how I'm kind of gently blending the colors back? Now see here, for instance, I got to go back in now and put some more darks behind. So we go back with, say, sienna or blue or whatever color you feel is necessary, and you come back now and you begin developing the back side of the rocks. This is a very simple process, folks. I'm not sure what causes so much confusion, but it's the human mind. Sometimes we become so intellectual and thinking we can figure things out. That's what gets in the mind. If you just learn to be free with your painting like this. See, I come back with the darks. Then you come back with your lights again. And you kind of go back and forth a couple of times until you get your forms. Like now I want to shape this one a little bit differently, a little bit more form to it. And see, I leave little pockets of light and dark that make it have interest. Then I'm going to come back up to this one. Notice how everything is a quick stroke. Everything is very, very quick. See, I can kind of highlight that. See how I dry brush down, blending it very subtly back into the rock. Like this one. Then I'll come over here and okay, now look, what do you do with a mess like this? Well, here's what you do. You just look for a rock that might possibly be floating around in there. And like this one right here could be another long one like this one over here. Just kind of highlight the top of it, dry brush the front and down and come around like so. There's that rock that's found, and here's another one here. Little one inside there. See, you can make lots of rocks out of just a few blobs. Now see, after you kind of just basically found the rock, that's all you're doing. Then you come back and you start back with the darks again, like we did on these. Rinse my brush. And I'm going to take a little bit of blue and burnt sienna. Now I'll come back on the back side here. Make that a little darker. Down in the pockets where the rocks touch each other and overlap each other, you're going to have lots of this shadowed color so that it looks contrasted. Now you pull this in there. And then you can take your brush and kind of dab it. See, that creates little, almost like little cracks and crevices and things like that. I'm going to make a different kind of rock out of this one. Okay, and then you can just keep coming back and forth with your darks and lights until you have all of your rocks in place. And then you can, if you were in a real painting, so to speak, where you had, grass and stuff, which I'm going to show you a little bit about that, then whatever part's left showing, then you just highlight the top part. So now we just take a little bit of grass, like with our number 10 brush. I'm going to take a little green, a little sienna, a little purple, and I'm going to just dry brush some grass up, turning my brush sideways like this. This will kind of help settle the the rocks down so that they're not just floating in the air. So you just kind of scrub up grass. Now on the other panel over here, I'm going to show you how to make just like a meadow of grass. Really some wonderful techniques for doing that. See, we'll just play like this, a little hillside here. So we pull the grass up here, and we got our rock right there. So we put the grass there. And then all of a sudden, watch these rocks just appear out of the grass. It's really neat how paintings it's like magic. They just appear. Things just appear out of nowhere, it seems like. Then you take some brighter color grass if you want to, maybe a little phthalo yellow-green, and you just go ahead and put a few highlighted grasses in there that will contrast against the rocks. And see, this helps to settle the rocks down so they don't just stand out like a sore thumb. Everything blends in now. Then what's showing on the rock, whatever's left, see this, the tops of these rocks, Then you come in and you take a smaller brush, like in this case I'll probably go to my little number 4 sable, and then I put the brighter highlights on. So I would maybe use a little white and touch of orange, or even a little yellow. Just get a clean light, and you find the rocks. Let's start down here with this little one, for instance, and I put a clean light like this, and I kind of soften the edge with my finger, and there you see the sun's coming down and hitting the top of that rock, and then here's the bigger rock. Now you don't highlight each and every rock completely over, because every time you put a new highlight on, if you completely paint over what you had underneath, you never get your third dimension. And that's where so many of us make our mistakes. Now see, like here I'm going to highlight just this little top. See how I'm just developing the highlights and kind of cleaning the rocks up. That's all you have to do there. That's just so much fun. Now, get this one. So this kind of helps some of you understand a little bit more about the rock process and what you have to do to suggest rocks and give them a little character, and why they're not so scary after all. Rocks are not that big of a problem. See, everything's done with a loose, free stroke. Now, I have to say, up close, when you look at these, they look pretty sloppy and messy, but when you stand back, you have the character of a rock. And then when you put everything in around them, like the grasses and the weeds and the flowers, you're doing really well. Now, when you use your little script brush to finally come in there, see, and put the little weeds like this, that also adds a little character to the painting and makes everything just fall right into place. See, I just put a few little weeds in here by using my script brush, and it just adds all the interest to the painting and just settles everything down. Now you can use light colored ones and darker ones, and that's how you kind of finish a rock formation. Isn't that exciting? Now we're going to go over to the other side here in just a second, and we're going to do a grassy hillside. Now the reason I'm going to do that is because a lot of people really struggle with grass, knowing how to get it to look soft and fluffy. I'm going to show you a technique that some of you have seen before, maybe not quite like this. All right, now see, I got those little weeds, and see how everything looks finished out there? That's a lot of fun. So practice that, having the sun coming from different directions, this direction and then this direction, and I guarantee you you'll end up with a real good handle on rocks for your next finished painting.